Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we're looking at Miscellaneous Myths by Overly Sarcastic Production. This is going to be Hermes, one of the 12 Olympians, and frankly, if it's anything like the previous ones, I'm really interested in what's going to happen because there's been a whole lot of change between the Hellenistic and the pre-Hellenistic periods. There's so much change and cross-pollination of ideas involved that I am really curious to see how Hermes is going to go. I know he's the messenger god, but how he comes about, what he's going to do, and where he's drawing from, this is what I'm really looking forward to, and I really cannot wait. So we're going to do it. You guys know the deal? Link below video. Hit it up. Let's get started.
What's the Greek god you see the most influence of in your everyday life? Wrong, it's Hermes. Hermes.
Madison.
Hermes. Kind of hope you're not dealing with that daily, but still Hermes.
The fuck?
Hermes,
Is that
known to the
Mercury?
Romans as Mercury, was the ancient
yeah.
Greek god of roads, journeys, merchants, thieves, athletes, trickery, and a handful of other related
Thieves, athletes, and trickery. There's a joke in there about sports betting somewhere, but that's probably not going to be okay with my bookie.
things. He was predominantly recognized as a messenger god, but he was also revered as an underworld god and a psychopomp responsible for
Wait, he was a psychopomp? It's probably in relation to medicine somehow.
guiding the souls of the dead. He also pulled a triple shift, guiding
Messenger,
dreams,
guiding
and had a
souls,
hobby
okay.
on the side of helping out mortal heroes when they got wrapped up in sticky situations. With that
All of
many
them.
jobs, it's no wonder he's so widespread these days.
Yeah.
A millennial icon. So before we start in on the whole
Wait, what did you say? Millennial icon? I'm sorry. Did they just pull out a joke about having multiple jobs?
It's no wonder he's so widespread these days.
Oh, this is going to be disturbing, isn't it? It's funny because minimum wage can't pay rent. Yeah. Yeah, that is completely accurate and very much hurts. You only have 24 hours in a week? Don't worry, just work 2 jobs at once. And I don't mean separate jobs. I mean, you need to work 80 hours and 40 hours. How that works out, that's for you to decide.
So before we start in on the whole historical context, character development thing, let's do a quick rundown of where exactly Hermes stands in the mythology of ancient Greece.
The god,
Hermes
the myth,
is
the
very young
legend.
by Olympian standards. Only
Really?
Dionysus is canonically younger. He's born
That means very little because while canonically younger is one thing, historically Dionysus was one of the oldest gods because he was established well early on. Huh.
to the Pleiad Maya in the mountain in Arcadia, and is unsurprisingly the son of Zeus.
It just blames Zeus. What? Nothing, Airier. I live in a cave to avoid this crap.
Like roughly 7% of all of ancient Greece. But Hermes
Yeah.
sets himself apart from the other Olympians by getting his shenaniganery underway literally the
What?
day he's born. According to the Homeric
What
hymn
did he do?
Hermes, the first thing he does after being born is find a tortoise, kill it, and turn its shell into a lyre. Then he gets hungry, so he does the only rational thing and steals 50 of Apollo's sacred cattle. Oh, but what if Apollo notices they're missing? Well, obviously Hermes reverses their hooves first, so it looks like they're walking backwards. Duh, you guys. Anyway,
I'm sorry. Reverses their hooves so they walk backwards? Or they just walk backwards. Translation, I read implied he physically reversed the hooves. Don't at me. Either one is interesting because he'd be following the tracks and he'd be going in the intentionally wrong direction. I mean, granted, he could just then follow the other way. But at that point, he already ate the 50 different animals. Godly appetites, I guess.
Anyway, Hermes stows the cows and starts a fire so he can sacrifice some meat to the gods, including himself, of course. Then
Oh.
he scoots back home and puts
That is weird. Am I the one who think of that? Making a sacrifice to the gods, including yourself. So isn't that literally just cooking for yourself at that point? I make this sacrifice to the gods, which I humbly accept on behalf of myself, who is me, and also a god. Yeah, it does feel weird. Maybe there was something lost in translation.
on a helpless baby
Smell like
act, but his
beef.
mom isn't buying it. So instead, Hermes explains to her that this is all part of his
Look, Mom, I'm not going to spend the rest of my immortality living in a cave. Yeah, he got out a bit.
cunning plan to put himself on the Olympians' radar so he can get them both the respect and honor they deserve.
I've never heard about the mom, although the Pleiad seems like something in a constellation. So I'm assuming it didn't go well for her, but Hermes seems to take it pretty well. And that's why he made the sacrifice, because he's both sacrificing to himself as a god, but also to the rest to put him on his radar, like Red just said. So it's literally a, hey, look at me, I exist. What the hell is Hera going to do to fuck this up?
Instead of, living in a cave. Meanwhile, Apollo has finally noticed his cows are missing,
Yeah.
and after a little detective work, he tracks down Hermes and
Wait, what did he say? Also the baby being smug.
living in a cave. Meanwhile,
Okay,
Apollo has
Apollo.
finally noticed his
wrong
cows are
button.
missing, and after a little
Yeah, the glowing baby gave me 20 bucks not to tell anyone about the cows he had. To be fair, lying to a god is probably a bad option, so yeah. On the other hand, he just lied to another god, so he done fucked up.
detective work, he tracks down Hermes in
My lord Apollo, what brings you to my home? Sorry, my humble home. And Red drew him with a baby bottle. Oh my god.
his cave. Apollo interrogates Hermes, who
Where are my cows? Now, what would a mere infant know of these cows you speak of? My god. I'm sorry. Red does smug a lot, but smug baby. That is something I wasn't expecting to see today. I'm completely okay with this. Oh my god.
insists he's just a widow baby who doesn't know anything about any cows, so Apollo brings him to Zeus, who thinks this entire situation is absolutely hilarious. Zeus tells Hermes to guide Apollo to the cows, and on the way, Hermes wins Apollo over.
Life is older there, older than the trees, because he's playing the lyre he made out of the tortoiseshell, yeah.
By playing the lyre for him. Apollo is so enchanted that he promises.
Coming. Oh, country roads take me. Oh my god, he's playing that song. Red's having fun with this. That's really good. You'll make a good god.
Hermes will be the messenger of the gods, and he and his mother will be honored among the Olympians. He trades his role of herdsman for Hermes' lyre, and the two of them return to Olympus.
Oh, so he traded off already. 50 cows for a lyre. Was this part of the aspect of trickery or thievery at this point? Kissing up to the me. Bold. Strategy. Oh, bold strategy. I thought that said strangery for a second. Wish more of my siblings tried it. Yeah, most of them tried to either ignore, screw over, or just mess with him, so that makes sense.
And in exchange for Hermes promising never to rob him again, Apollo also gives him his caduceus, a small staff with two snakes coiled around it.
Oh, he had that originally.
Seen as a symbol of like messengers and heralds, but it's also very specifically a symbol of Hermes. So Hermes makes his debut as a trickster underdog, wrangling an improbable victory through cunning and trickery. And despite winning,
the fact that he not only won, he won through trickery, and he made the guy he's tricking go along with it. That is some high-grade con artist level BS-ery there, and it's kind of respectable.
Untold power and fame in the process, somehow still manages to come across as a tricksy underdog for centuries to come. Neat trick. Hermes makes regular appearances in the mythology, playing a supporting role in both the Iliad and the Odyssey.
I just realized his helmet, it really does look like something out of World War I, because without the wings, it just looks like a bucket helmet. It's kind of blatant, actually. Which is weird, because I didn't realize they had that style of helmet at the time. It's probably the cloak that made me think that, because it looks like army fatigues from literally just the shoulders up. Shoulders down, yeah. The
Odyssey. In the Iliad, though he was allied with the Achaeans for the majority of the book, he also protected King Priam when he traveled.
Want to steal a body? Steal! And they got him on that.
Traveled to the Achaean camp to retrieve the body of his son Hector. And in the Odyssey, Hermes provided regular help and advice to Odysseus, including helping him confront Circe to break her enchantment on his men, and later guiding the dead souls of the suitors to the afterlife. This extra special deific assistance might have been because Odysseus is actually his great-grandson, the grandkid of his son Autolycus.
Oh, he had kids. The wolf itself. Damn, that's one hell of a name. Bandit, shapeshifter, always favored by Hermes, but only his son, post-Odyssey, named Odysseus. Oh.
Who is a notorious bandit, trickster, and shapeshifter. Runs in the family, I guess.
Yeah.
One of Hermes' most well-known accomplishments is killing the 100-eyed giant Argus. In the myth of Io, for somewhat complicated reasons, the nymph Io ends up getting turned into a cow and kept under the watchful guard of Argus. Zeus...
Oh! So Io was turned into a cow? I'm assuming Zeus did something. Kind of fine.
Asks Hermes to free her, so Hermes disguises himself as a simple shepherd, lures Argus to sleep.
Oh, he actually has the same hat still. And that's when Pan thought, hey, I can still work with this. Oh, no. I can see why the cow has really wide eyes right now, because talking about Pan is a satyr as far as I realize it. I can still work with this implies that cow should be very afraid. I mean, it's not Zeus for once, but yeah. The cow's paying attention. They know they're in trouble.
With a long and boring story about the creation of the panpipes, then cuts off his head. To commemorate the occasion, Hermes is most frequently referred to with the epithet Argefontes, meaning Argus Slayer. Hermes has a handful of other appearances in popular Greek mythology. He frequently helps out errant heroes like Perseus and Orestes by giving them the means to sneak around invisibly or fool their enemies. In fact, this trickery is a major characteristic of Hermes. Hermes is the god of liars and thieves, along with all the other stuff in his purview. And while these may seem like kind of unheroic qualities for a god to instill, actually most Greek heroes were tricksters or underdogs on some level.
Because they were strong,
Heracles,
it's easy.
who was the best equipped person on the planet to solve all his problems with sheer brute force, still had to be clever on occasion, like when he tricked Atlas into taking back the sky. So even though Odysseus got a bit of a bad rap for being all trick...
Okay, gonna be honest, I had never seen this statue before, but that's really damn cool looking. I'm pretty sure it's a more modern statue because the really rough look is something that we've started to favor more recently within the last, I think, 100 years. I'm not quite sure when the first style started, but I've seen a lot more statues with that effect. So this is probably something much more recent, but it's actually really cool looking because of the posing. And I think that's another person down there as well. It's hard to tell from this angle.
Trickery all the time. In practice, trickery was a well-respected heroic trait when used in moderation, and it was thanks in large part to Hermes' influence. Now,
I mean, to give it more context, the idea of a tricksy hero isn't just limited to the Greeks. One of the most famous tricksy heroes of all time right now, who's more relevant in a more culturally appropriate basis, and by that I mean within the last 200 years, would be Sherlock Holmes, who was literally nothing but tricks. The guy was in costume all the time, tricking everyone. That's why it was written from Watson's point of view instead of Holmes, because Holmes would explain everything in his own monologue, so you never took his monologue, you went into Watson, who had to discover what was going on as it was revealed to him, but was also intelligent enough to pick up what was going on. It's why his stories work that way. So the idea of a tricksy hero isn't just a Greek thing, and it's still something we do represent as a good trait frequently. It's just played off differently, where before it was explicit thievery. Now it's more like, oh, I just happened to get this, and we're going to ignore the thievery aspect. It's only illegal if I get caught, and I'm the good guy, so I won't. Yeah. Or the doctor.
Before we get to the history, there's one wacky thing to know about Hermes that we're going to look into a little more later, and that's these things.
What?
These are called Hermes. They were boundary and border markers found along roadways. They usually had Hermes' head, although that varied, and they always had a dong. I don't know why the dong is non-negotiable.
So that's why there's a doorknob.
Yeah, with Hermes being a god of boundaries and borders, it kind of makes sense that he'd be on most of these road markers.
The road markers make sense, but they all have... Are they measuring out the feet? I mean, I've heard of having a third foot, but I think they're making it a little extreme on this one.
But at the same time, it's still a little weird, and not just because of the dong situation. So let's hold off on investigating that for a bit and get to the history.
The history?
So, first things first, Hermes used to be Pan. Let me explain. Now,
so Pan, who was the satyr, and that story about Pan saying, this is fine, is even more troubling at that point. Oh, jeez. Which is weird, though, because I thought Pan and Hermes were actually very separate.
the Greek god Pan is a mysterious
I didn't know he's a god
figure.
either.
Not purposefully, he's just really old, so there's not much clear information available about his origins or development. Pan, as he was characterized in the era of ancient Greece,
Wilderness, shepherds, flock, nature, mountain wilds, field groves, glens, sex and fertility, theatrical criticism. Really? They had a god for theatrical criticism. It's probably some kind of translation issue then, because of the question marks. Companion to the nymphs, responsible for panic. Literally, legendary. Okay. Yeah, that's why. Because it's a holdover from his first incarnation.
This is generally considered to be a rustic wild god. Officially, he's the god of forests, mountain wilderness, fertility, shepherds and flocks, but he's also got a bunch of other wacky characteristics on the side. His worship was almost exclusively found in the mountainous inland region of Arcadia, which is also Hermes' birthplace. And Arcadia was known for being inland, forested, and very old compared to the rest of Greece. Pan, as a wild god, wasn't really worshipped in built structures. He was worshipped in natural caves and
Oh, so it's a cave that they carved out the outside of it. Kind of like Petra.
And only ever had 2 constructed temples, one of them in Peloponnese. In the mythology, Pan is considered older than the Olympians. He's credited with having gifted Artemis her hunting dogs and Apollo his gift of prophecy. He's really? I wonder how that works out, that he has an established lore of what he was, and then as the youngest god is someone completely different but still connected. Most commonly known for 2 things that both bear his name, panpipes and panic. Pan created the syrinx, or panpipes, when a nymph he was chasing turned herself into reeds to escape, so he turned her into a musical instrument he could put his lips all over. Bit twisted. Now panic...
Ew. I guess he played her like a pan flute. Ew. Sudden fear caused when the normally peaceful Pan is abruptly woken from his nap, making him shout and startle his flock. Oh, and then the running and the craze is the flock going crazy.
We all know describes a kind of fear so intense that it borders on madness. Pan is specifically credited as being responsible for panic. He would yell in the woods, and anyone who heard it would be inflicted with panic. He could supposedly rout entire armies with it. Now, we know some stuff about Pan, but there's a lot about him that's very vague and fuzzy. His parentage, for example, is incredibly vague and varied, suggesting he's very old, because that's the kind of myth that takes a while to drift. And in fact, Pan is probably older than Mycenaean Greece.
Really? Really?
Those comparative mythology scholars working to reconstruct the Proto-Indo-European religion that spawned off the Vedic, Norse, and Greek mythologies theorize that Pan is an offshoot of the Proto-Indo-European pastoral god.
I'm not even going to try and say it.
The only other known offshoot is Pushan, a Vedic pastoral deity. The Rig Veda.
So, I've seen the Mycenaean just because that's the ancient Greece that everyone is talking about for Dionysus. And by everyone, I specifically mean Red. And Pan predates it, so Hermes, being the youngest, is also one of the absolute oldest? Oh, and that's when the other offshoot is just referenced, so Pan would have already existed. Damn.
Which mentions Pushan, might be as old as 1700 BC, so if Pan is an offshoot of the same god, he most likely predates the Mycenaean age that started in 1600 BC. Now the thing is, due to a lack of written sources, we don't know much about how Pan was characterized before ancient Greece, but Pushan can give us a lot of information by proxy.
Because if we see one, and if he's the Vedic god, then, and he's the offshoot from the same source, it would be like the various ways to understand Aphrodite if we only had her 3 aspects later on to understand Ishtar. Entirely possible, but also you might completely miss the mark if you're trying to compare one to the other because they'd be very different between them. So probably similarities, but very different. But on the other hand, we have what came later, so maybe there's that transitionary period. Although again, going back to Aphrodite, her various aspects were sometimes completely radically different. Before and after, and the middle one that we'd be using as translationary period might be completely different than the others, and we wouldn't have any clue.
Pushan is the Vedic deity of journeys, roads, travel, pastoralism, herding, and a handful of other things. He's also a psychopomp. Did you notice these are all things Hermes is a god of? So the theory, and it's not actually my theory, this is generally accepted these days, is that way back in or before the Mycenaean age, Hermes was split from Pan, and before that, original Pan was very similar to Pushan, a liminal god of navigating between places like roads, the general wilderness, and the journey to the afterlife. When this original Pan was subdivided, Pan retained his pastoralist and herding connotations, but all the roads and journeys.
Okay, just on a sheer drawing level, I love how there's the simplistic versions of Pan and Hermes she does down here for most of the gods, but then when you go for the original Pan, it's so much more detailed. There's a specific texture put in there, and the eyes have the actual inner slits, but you can see the iris is glowing, and I think those are goat eyes because they're going sideways as well. That is absolutely intense. Something might look a bit different. I have no idea what it is. It has absolutely nothing to do with me being late and having to cut the last video extremely short because I had to immediately run and hoped it was saved. And if it's not, this is going to be awkward because that would be implying that I forget things, and I would never do that. More importantly, moving on.
But all the roads and journey stuff went to Hermes, leaving Pan quite reduced. And it's worth noting that Hermes also has some herding associations. Now, this theory isn't just based on the fact that Hermes has general similarities to a Vedic deity. Pan and Hermes also have some other weird connections. For one, their origins are both in Arcadia, as are their centers of worship. For another, in some versions of the mythology...
Whoa. Dionysus isn't a dryad. Hermes... so they both went into here to Pan, and then Apollo and Penelope into Pan. So he could possibly be his own dad. We are reaching dangerous levels of Alabama here.
Pan is Hermes' son? Now that's a damn weird connection, but it makes sense to link them in a backwards kind of way. And, surprisingly relevant, Hermes and Pan are both mythically notorious for having some serious dongage going on. So let's...
I mean, Pan, yeah, satyr, but I wasn't aware of Hermes being so... endowed.
Circle back to the Hermes. Now the
that was surprising.
Herm literally means piled stones. It's not a name. Hermes' name is not a name, and Herms are a very old concept in that region, older than ancient Greece, and older.
Oh, so his name is literally a marker. Wait, pile of stones. He's known for having a erect disposition. There's no connotation equaling this in history that just translate, is it? I mean, maybe saying someone is rock something that I will not finish on YouTube for YouTube reasons. That wouldn't possibly be slang. That had to be much newer slang, even though it does kind of fit. Although I can see a lot of people who are really into this time period making it a thing because they think it's funny. I'm not just saying that because I would definitely do it because it's stupid and it would never catch on, but I think it's hilarious.
Older than
Nah,
Hermes.
it's definitely unrelated.
Before they were sculpted statues, roads were demarcated with heaps of stones, but the lack of human features didn't make them any less sacred. Hermes were revered. It was customary to throw a stone on the heap or anoint it with oil if you were feeling particularly devout, and messing with them or later defacing them was seen as this horrible
And they probably
affront.
deified it
Pan,
and gave it
as
physical
the
features.
old deity of roads and journeys, was probably the god revered through the Hermes. Now remember back in the Aphrodite video when I mentioned divine epithets and how they described the capacity a god was being worshipped in? We don't actually know for certain, but it seems very likely that way back in the day, Pan had some kind of Herm-related epithet describing him as Pan of the piled boundary stones. And also...
So they literally separated the epithet from the god it was related to until Hermes, pile of stones, is now its own god as opposed to Pan, who was the initial god. Dude, linguistic backtracking is fun. It could also be completely wrong, but it's most likely somehow close to the truth because words do change based on how people use them.
So way back in the day, this epithet got separated from him into its own deity, Hermes. Now this all happened very early, so we don't really know why Hermes separated from Pan. It might have been because Pan was a fairly specialized deity and his worship was having trouble expanding beyond the more rustic wildlands, so they peeled off this brand spanking new deity with so much mass market appeal he's literally still showing up on brand labels.
Wait, what? FTD? Flourish Transworld Delivery? I don't know what that is, and... Oh, the Goodyear tire is literally Hermes' shoe. Can we all pretend I knew that? That's, I mean, I know I give off great car guy energy, but even then, man, it's not exactly hidden.
Whatever the original reason, we know Hermes is attested in Mycenaean Linear B inscriptions, or at least a word that sounds like Hermes, and that means Hermes split from Pan well before we have any sort of proper records. By the time the 800s hit and Homer starts writing his epics, Hermes is firmly established, as evidenced by his role in the Iliad, and Pan has already been reduced to a simple wilderness god. Oh, before we move on, here's a fun fact about Pan. Some of you who are well acquainted with Greek mythological esoterica, or just read the Percy Jackson
I don't know either of those, so I'm probably going to be missing something here. If I happen to miss something obvious, let me know in the comments because I do appreciate it.
books may have heard that Pan is canonically dead. According to Plutarch, writing around 100 AD, a mere handful of decades earlier, during the reign of Emperor Tiberius, a divine voice called out from the Isle of
Thamos, the great god Pan, is dead. Oh man. Really? They would actually say a god is dead? Considering all the other gods so far had been not so much dead as just swallowed, but still recoverable. Do they die or they just kind of get absorbed?
To a sailor named Thamos and told him to tell everyone that the great god Pan was dead. Thamos obliged, and everyone was slightly bummed to hear that Pan was dead. However, Pan didn't actually seem to be dead in any meaningful sense. His shrines were still frequented, his worship...
Oh yeah, she mentioned the rock cutouts in the caves. Dude, that is still so freaking cool. I mean, this is one of those things where if money wasn't an issue, and I wasn't absolutely terrified to travel that far on a plane, this would be the coolest thing ever, and probably not allowed to go this close because it would be destroyed by people at this point.
Worship still happened.
Maybe.
So what was all that about? Well, this whole thing might be a hilarious misunderstanding. Do you remember in my old Underworld Myths video I mentioned that Ishtar had a dead boyfriend named Tom?
I'm using a very bright screen right now. All this flashing? I didn't really know what photosensitivity was. And now suddenly I'm realizing, oh, this is what it is. Goddamn.
And in my Aphrodite video, I elaborated that Tammuz had his own cult and it had been brought to Greece. Well, in ancient Greek, the sentence, Thamos, the great god Pan is dead, is read as Thamos Pan Megas Tethneke. But there's this funny little thing in Greek. Pan, along with being the god's name, is a prefix, meaning all. So this sentence could be, Thamos, Pan the Great is dead. Or it could be, Tammuz the All-Great is dead.
So it literally has multiple translations. And it was actually referring to a separate god but read as Pan. Because it was also a conjunction. Oh, sorry. This is incredibly in the weeds right now, but I'm loving every second of this because it's so interesting. I wonder if various aspects of the god were then created by different belief systems around it.
So this whole thing about Pan being dead might have been the result of some sailors overhearing the cult of Tammuz praising Tammuz for his sole accomplishment and thought they were hearing them tell some dude named Tammuz that the god named Pan had died. Anyway, I thought that was the funniest thing in the world when I learned it. You're welcome for that wacky anecdote to share at parties. Back to Hermes.
Hermes.
Now, in the early days of
Greece?
ancient Greece, Hermes didn't actually look too dissimilar to Pan. In the
Really?
Archaic Age, between 800 and 500 BC, Hermes was always represented as an older, bearded man. In classical and Hellenistic...
Wait, seriously? Huh. I'm just so used to the more Disney version of Hercules. So seeing him like this is thinking, wow, I'd almost think it was something out of the Babylonia region. I just referred to everything between the Euphrates. I referred to an entire section of the world as it is named in FGO. This is on me.
In classical and Hellenistic Greece, his image changed to the one we recognize now. An athlete, young, beardless, and mostly naked. Dionysus also underwent a similar transformation.
Yeah, it was
Maybe
creepier
the
for
Romans
him.
just weren't into older dudes. Speaking of, we should
I mean, Athens has a reputation.
really talk about Mercury, the Roman version of Hermes.
Oh, we're actually going this far too.
Now, most Roman versions of Greek gods started off as fully developed deities in their own right.
Really?
For example, Mars, the parallel to Ares, was originally an agricultural deity as well as a war god. And
What? Oh, honestly, I thought they just kind of copy and pasted them like they did with most of the art in Rome that was literally just taken from other places. Yeah, we'll come to Rome. We'll take your shit.
most notably, wasn't treated with anywhere near as much contempt as Ares was within his own pantheon.
Oh.
For the most part, the other Roman gods were also full-fledged deities, though sometimes they got a little confused and accidentally mashed other gods together, like Pluto, Hades' Roman equivalent, who was accidentally both the underworld god Pluton and the wealth god Plutus. But Mercury?
Oh.
Mercury didn't.
Oh, so that's why when I see certain depictions of Hades, they've translated back to say that he has the wealth on the underworld. I've seen a lot of random anime that mentions Greek gods, and they always seem to conflate that. So I guess they're going off the Roman version that had the wealth and then equate it to just, well, mining has ore, and ore is valuable, so wealth. It's actually kind of cool how an interpretation mashed together after the fact, taken wholesale from a separate culture, is then remashed together into the original frame, but by a completely different culture that doesn't actually worship it. The more you think about it, the more confusing it gets that anything is actually transferred over, even slightly correct. It's actually kind of impressive.
Didn't exist. The name Mercury has
multi-thousand-year
uncertain
telephone.
etymology, but probably derives either from the Latin root of merchant
Wait, what?
or from an older word for boundary. Either way, the
Oh.
name is a literal
Boundary,
descriptor of one of
roads.
Hermes' divine duties and has no history beyond that. Mercury did seem to absorb a handful of
Arubus of Sisca, The Case Against Pagans, basically a burn book of assorted pagan gods intended to explain why the Christian God is the best on the block. Not we alone, but the voice of truth says that, and oh God, it's this style of writing. Even if it's a translation, I hate it. This style of writing is just a pain. I'm very much in the newspaper style of just the facts, get to it, don't belabor the point. Where for a lot of human history, you belabor that damn point, because if you're going to take forever to write this shit, it's going to feel fun to say, and you're going to build yourself up.
minor Roman deities called the Dei Lucri, a collective of minor gods of profit, specifically immoral profit that comes from bad sources. But basically, Mercury was literally just the Roman name for Hermes. I'm not sure why they bothered. They didn't make up a Latin name for Apollo, but it is what it is.
Really?
Now, during the Roman era, Hermes/Mercury was
I figured I just didn't know
incredibly
it.
popular. Since Rome was all about that expansion, Hermes' status as the god of trade and merchants saw a lot of use. He turned up on the coinage.
At that point, I'm almost wondering if he might have been one of the initial reasons they stole it and everyone else just came with him. Because if they didn't change him and it's all about expansion. See, this is one of those things I wish I would know more about. Which god was started to worship in Rome first? And did the others come with it? Did they all go wholesale and get changed based on who was worshiping it? Or is it some other crazy random thing? I don't know. But it would be kind of cool if, since he was the least changed, he was the initial impetus. But at the same time, we've seen how other gods were changed because of the initial impetus. So it might be that he was the latest one added in because, well, shit, we're moving around a lot and we know exactly what the initial people said. And since he's a god of trade, maybe it was traders who actually went to places and saw the god firsthand as it was worshipped in those areas. I don't know. Either could be true or none of them, but it's always fascinating to try and figure it out.
His sculptures are all over Pompeii, and there is
Really?
one
Ooh.
other quirk of his that
Actually, I wanna see
he
that
turned
again.
up on the coinage. His sculptures
I don't see a lot of Pompeii art because, honestly, I just forget to look all the time. It's also really morbid when you realize why it's so preserved. It's so cool to see it.
are all over Pompeii, and there is one other quirk of his that made him so popular.
Oh?
See, Rome had this policy that when
Rome? Nice gods, we'll take it. This is going to sound weird, but because of the overlay here, I'm actually having trouble recognizing what this is. I'm assuming it's probably Greece.
Whenever they subsumed another culture, they treated that culture's gods as their own.
Yep.
Literally, they found the Roman god that most closely resembled the local god and insisted they were the same. First,
wait, seriously? Oh, so they just put over Minerva. Close name to Minerva, Roman goddess of poetry, wisdom, medicine, commerce, the arts. Yeah.
Were the same. First they did it with the Greeks, and then when they dealt with the Celts, this led to Mercury being syncretized with Lugus, known in Ireland as Lu, and in...
Wait, they said it's Lugus? I've heard of Lu because FGO, but I didn't realize there was a version that actually had the S at the end. I mean, I always thought I was mispronouncing when I said Lu as well, so maybe I shouldn't say anything. I mean, never mind. I usually expect I'm wrong. When I'm right, it's weird.
In Wales is Flu, Lu, also Lu.
Oh, those were words. Oh. Oh, I thought Red just hit a bunch of random letters by accident and forgot to edit them out. I mean, it is Welsh, so that actually does make sense.
I don't know, man. I'm sorry.
Not even going to try it.
It was broadly seen as a big stonking deal.
Oh, that's kind of cool. It's actually 3 different heads with 3 separate noses and 3 separate mouths with 2 eyes. That's a really cool bit of art.
As in the creator of all arts, along with being a badass warrior hero, king and stuff. The Romans saw him as a patron of commerce, so he was equated with the commercial-friendly Mercury. And if that's not wacky enough for you, when the Romans dealt with Germanic peoples, they equated Mercury with motherfucking Odin.
What?
Was it because they were travelers?
I'm assuming bird wings on the feet, ravens on the shoulder. It's all feathers.
Was it because they were psychopomps? Was it that style and hat staff combo? Unclear. But the Romans...
Wait. Was that Gandalf?
Travelers? Was it because they were psychopomps? Was it that
Okay, no, that's Odin is the one eye. Sorry, for a second there, I legitimately thought that was a representation of Gandalf. I'm sorry, but look at that and tell me it's not the hat, man. It's the hat. It's very much the hat.
Island hat staff combo? Unclear. But the Romans were certain that the Germanic people worshipped Mercury as Odin. The Ptolemaic...
See, here's the weird part. There's so little information, according to Red, about what we have preserved for the Norse and Germanic religions. What happens if they know something we don't know? And while it's probably not exactly as they said, because it's what the Romans did, there was something there to learn more about him through what other people interpreted it as. That's probably more in Blue's territory. I'm hoping he did something like comparative aspects of gods, but that would be incredibly in the weeds, and I'm not sure he would do that. That said, if I'm wrong, let me know, because that would be so freaking cool.
Greeks also syncretized Hermes with a few different gods, including Thoth and Anubis. Thoth because of their
Anubis, really?
cleverness and I guess tendency to write stuff down, and Anubis because of their shared psychopomp duties. Hermes was all over the place, which is honestly very appropriate. Hermes also turns up in a lot of Aesop's fables for some reason.
Really?
Don't know what's up with that.
No, I actually didn't even know that. I didn't realize Aesop's Fables, wow, I can't speak today. Fables had the gods in it. Huh. Most
Hermes
popular?
is a versatile god, but I can't say for certain why he's so literally iconic. There are some possibilities. Maybe his speed and mobility resonates well with our modern high-speed society. Maybe he's one of the few Olympians to combine likable character traits with a general lack of distractingly awful character flaws. Maybe it's just because medicine...
I mean, the lack of character flaws is basically Hades to a T, and I don't know if he was there. I think it's probably just the medicine aspect. That would be my guess.
Communication and capitalism are kind of central to most societies, and they're also central to what he represents. I don't know.
Well,
whatever the
would be newer
reason,
because there used to be
Hermes'
fear of that.
liminal status helps him get into the cracks of almost any society and then just stay.
You heard it here, folks. Hermes, the Greek god who's good at getting in the crack. There's really no good way to interpret that.
There forever, turning up in unexpected places centuries down the line.
Oh,
He's
the
got
car
this certain
company.
Je ne sais quoi, keeping him in the popular consciousness long after the rest of his pantheon faded. Project
Mercury. Oh my god, that was a reference as well. I always figured it was just the name of the planet, and even then it would be a reference, but I thought it was more of a reference directly to the planet as opposed to an indirect reference to the god through the planet. But no, it was just a direct reference to the god, and the planet happened to share the name. There's probably someone going like, God? Travel? Planet named after God? Space? 2 references for the price of 1. Oh yeah. I can respect that.
Into novelty or obscurity. I mean, I get it. He's just fun. I always like the trickster gods. What do you want from me?
Oh damn, is he mugs of her art? That's actually really damn cool. And that was really damn good. I'm kind of fascinated by how Red breaks these down and just seeing how the various gods have changed and have moved between their various iterations. The fact that there's a lot more information about this, that it can be drawn based on how the linguistics of it have compared and the various translations, or the mistranslation in the case of Pan being dead, and I know I'm geeking out right now about something incredibly niche and may or may not interest everyone. But frankly, that's literally what this entire channel is about, me geeking out about cool things that I have a massive just interest in. So I'm okay with this. Basically, what I'm saying is if you haven't already, there's a link below to the original video. I don't know how many of these specific looks into gods Red has done, but I've been told Blue also does a lot onto the individual cities, and frankly, I'm kind of wondering if I should take a break from the myths just to go into the actual history with the cities themselves, so I have more context when Red does more about the gods themselves, because that sounds fun. That's my reason. I'm sticking by it. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.